Hi guys, my intention for making this screencast is to kind of walk you through the hypothesis writing that we attempted last week. It's super important that we have this under control before we start trying to do the actual testing, because if we don't have the hypotheses written up correctly, testing them will not do us any good, and we won't be able to draw good conclusions from that. So this is the document that you were supposed to pull up last week and kind of give this a try on your own. Most of these things you will notice I do not have you submit. Just like in class, we get a lot of handouts where we do some practice on our own. This is one of those things. We have this to kind of look at, practice, and reflect on. I'm getting a lot of emails right now of people telling me that Canvas is making them go to YouTube to watch these videos or redirect them to YouTube. That's fine. You don't have to worry about missing points because of that. They're YouTube links. So it may just be something with the settings I've got set up that I'll have to fix, but it's perfectly fine if it directs you to YouTube to watch these. That's not a problem. Okay. So let's start with prompt number 1. We know that for each prompt, we have to define the parameter and we have to write both null and alternative hypotheses. And those are going to be sort of the primary first steps to any hypothesis test that we attempt from here on out, okay? We've got to do this every time we do a hypothesis test. So it's super important that we get this right. If we don't get this right, the test that we do won't be really relevant to the question that we're trying to answer. So let's look at prompt number 1. Jessica reads in her book about basset hounds that the author believes a typical male basset weighs 50 pounds. Okay, so we're going to start out first by defining the parameter. What are we talking about here? If you remember, our parameter is always going to be one of two things: a population mean or a population proportion. Okay, so how do we decide what's a mean and what's a proportion? If you remember, we talked about this. A mean is when we're collecting data about a numerical variable. A proportion would be data about a categorical variable. So like a percentage of people that agree with a concept. The answer, would be yes or no. In this case, we are recording basset hound weights, okay? And weight is a numerical variable. So we know we're dealing with a mean here. Since it's a population mean, we're going to use mu. Now you can actually write mu, okay? That's what mu looks like. Or, if you printed this out, of course, by hand, you could put the symbol for mu. Many people have asked, where do they find mu on a computer? If you go to symbols, mu is a symbol, okay? It's the Greek letter mu. So we're going to say mu equals, and then we're going to define this in words. Mean male basset hound weight, okay? And we might even put pounds on there so that we know what unit we're measuring in, okay? So that's our parameter. In other words, we're telling our reader what it is we're trying to draw a conclusion about. Okay, now we want null and alternative hypotheses. So I'm going to have my H sub naught or sub O, okay? That is my null hypothesis, okay? And I'm also going to have my alternative hypothesis, which is H sub A. Okay. Now, both of these are going to be about mu. I'm trying to develop two competing claims here, and that comes from the prompt. Now, the thing is, when we read prompt 1, we really only see one assertion about this number. We see that we have an author who believes the typical weight is 50 pounds. Okay, so what would be the only logical counterclaim? Okay, if the author is claiming they do weigh 50, the only logical counterclaim is that they don't weigh 50. So that claim of being equal to 50, that is our equation. Remember, the null must always be an equation. So I'm going to go insert my mu symbol, and I'm going to say mu equals 50 pounds. Okay. Now, here's where this is kind of hard for some people. If you're used to thinking of inequalities as having to be greater than or less than, one thing you always also have to remember is that an inequality can just be not equal to. That's kind of like the literal definition of inequality, not equal to. So if I want to represent that, put my symbol mu, And you also have a symbol for not equal to. Now, notice that when I pull up my drop-down box, all of these symbols are kind of here. These are my most frequently used symbols. If you haven't used those, you may have to go down here to more and kind of look for them. If not, you're always welcome to write that out in words, although when you're typing, assuming if we were writing by hand, we would definitely want to use the symbols. Okay, so my mu equals 50 pounds is the null value, and the not equals 50 is the alternative. Okay, so let's head on down to prompt 2. Jackson, despite reading the same book, believes that a typical male basset hound will weigh more than 50 pounds. Okay, now again, obviously here, our parameter has not changed. That's still going to be mean male basset hound weight in pounds. Okay, so let's think again about our hypotheses. We have our null and we have our alternative. Okay, it kind of again reads here like we have one claim. Okay, Jackson is claiming the weight is greater than 50 pounds. So based upon the way I read that, it's a little bit easier to see that that's clearly an inequality. And since that's an inequality, we should know that that has to belong with the alternative. Okay, so we're going to say mu. I don't have my greater than symbol up there, so I'm just going to type it in. Is greater than 50 pounds. Okay, so now we kind of wonder what would be the null. We know it has to be an equation. Okay, so we can go ahead and we can put in mu equals. But what is the equation? Think about the counterclaim to Jackson's. Jackson is saying he believes it's more than 50 pounds. What's sort of the opposite argument? He's in opposition to the book. Okay, and the book says it is 50 pounds. Okay, let's keep on trucking. We're down to prompt 3. Eric believes the average weight of an American 30-year-old male is 175 pounds. Okay, so again, we're going to define our parameter. We're gathering data on weight here. So just like with the basset hounds, this is a mean. It's a numerical variable. Okay, and since it is numerical, we're going to use mu, and we have to define what mu is here. It is the mean weight of an American 30-year-old male. Okay, and our 2 hypotheses, we can go ahead and set those up. Our null and our alternative. Okay, so Eric's claim is very clearly an equation. Okay, he's saying he believes that it is 175 pounds. So we definitely have an equation there. So that has to be the null. We're going to use mu equals 175 pounds. Okay, now what is the alternative claim? Here's where we're going to try to read the prompt, and we're going to really see that the prompt doesn't specify anything other than that. It doesn't say we might think it's greater. It doesn't say we might think it's less. Right now, we just need a competing claim against it is 175. Since there's no specification of us believing that it's greater or less, we are just going to use the not equal to, okay, 175 pounds. Prompt 4, which is our last one. Okay, Adrian has reason to believe the average high school student gets less than 8 hours of sleep a night. Okay, so we start out with defining a parameter. Again, hours of sleep is a numerical variable. It is not a categorical. Okay, we're going to measure it with numbers. And since that is the case, then this has to be a mean and not a proportion. Now, notice I'm always using mu. Remember that we do have another symbol for mean. We have X bar, but X bar represents a sample mean. Remember, the whole purpose of inference is to try to say something intellectual about a population mean. And they do have different symbols. That's why mu and x bar are both representing means. But mu represents the mean of a population, whereas x bar is the mean of a sample. So that's the definition of a parameter. Okay, we've got that mu, and we're going to define it as the number of hours of sleep a high school student gets per night. Okay. Make sure that you don't just say things like hours of sleep. Okay. Hours of sleep of who? I mean, that's kind of significant here because the answers that we would get from an adult, might not be the same as what we get from a high school student. So always make sure that when you define your parameter, that you're not too vague about your details, that you are as specific as need be without being excessive. Okay. So now we're going to try to run our hypotheses. Okay, I've got my null hypothesis, and I have my alternative hypothesis. And we know that if we read the prompt, Adrian has reason to believe the average high school student gets less than 8 hours of sleep. So that's definitely an inequality. So that means my prompt here is addressing the alternative. Okay, so I want to go and I want to deal with the alternative first because that's what my prompt is telling me. And it says it is less than, okay, less than 8 hours. Now, notice that in these alternatives, when we deal with inequalities, we only use greater thans or less thans or not equal to. We never use greater than and equal to because remember, the null is what takes care of that equal to portion. When it comes to the alternative, we're only going to have greater than, less than, or not equal to. Okay, so Adrian's claim is the alternative, less than 8 hours. So what would be the competing claim with that? That is an equation. What is sort of our standard here that we're comparing this to? This would have to be mu is equal to 8 hours. Okay, so hopefully kind of walking through this has helped you get used to the idea of writing hypotheses. If you have questions about this or concerns, you can always replay the video, see if that helps. If not, feel free to email me, okay? I can answer questions through email, and I do answer emails throughout the day. So hopefully you guys are doing okay and everything is going well.